Welcome to the Hope for Med podcast. I'm Dr. JB, your host, and today's featured guest is Dr. Sogol. She is a board-certified pediatrician and founder of ABC Pediatric Clinic. She lives in Houston, Texas. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited and honored to be on your podcast, and congratulations for your 1-year anniversary. That's so huge.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So let us start from the beginning. I love hearing about stories of what led you into a career in healthcare as a physician. So please share.
Yeah, so I'm going to start kind of at the beginning because it's significant for kind of my life story. I immigrated to the U.S. at the age of 10, so I was in 4th grade. So I am a first-generation immigrant. And we came to Houston and we settled in Houston. I've been in Houston for 30 years.
Okay. Nice. I'm sure it went by in a blink of an eye, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, where I'm from Iran, I'm from the Middle East. So literally I joke about there are 3 career choices that you get to pick from when you're from the Middle East. One is physician, one is a lawyer, and the other one is engineer. And so that is just kind of culturally, that's what I grew up with. And I knew I did not want to do engineering because I wasn't that good in math. And I thought that engineers just sat behind the computer and typed, and I was like, no, I have to talk to people. And so I was like, I think I'm going to be a lawyer. And then I got into high school and I didn't like reading. I didn't like writing. I read all the cliff notes in my literature class. And I was like, okay, well, we cross out lawyers. So I guess there's this thing called science. Yeah. I kind of like science, biology, physics wasn't my best. So it's like by default, I just chose to be a physician. And going through, I did the whole med school. I stayed in Texas. I went up to Tech, came back down, but still in Texas. And then I narrowed my options down to pediatrics. And one of the biggest reasons I did that because I went to med school at Baylor. And Baylor is contracted with Texas Children's Hospital, which is one of the top 3, 4, whatever largest hospitals, children's hospital. And back then, when we were in med school and half of our residency, and for people that are listening that are pediatricians or in the pediatric field, Dr. Ralph Feigen, which is you have your textbook of emergency medicine and we have our textbook of pediatrics. The textbook is called Cherry and Feigen because Dr. Feigen wrote half of the textbook. So he was a huge name in pediatrics. So he recruited a lot of the pediatric he recruited a lot of the med students from Baylor into the pediatric residency program. And so I didn't even interview. It was called the golden handshake. If you knew that you wanted to do pediatrics, you went to his office and you had a conversation, a very casual one. Hey, how are you? Da, da, da. And then he would be like, okay, great. And he'd give you a handshake. And that was it.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's how. So then I did 3 years of pediatric residency at Baylor, and I was actually supposed to. So I always loved emergency medicine for ICU. I don't know if that was something. I feel like a lot of ER doctors toggle between do I want to do ICU? Do I want to do ER? Because it's very procedure based. So anyways, I decided I wanted to apply for a PICU fellowship, pediatric ICU fellowship. And I went through the entire process and I matched at UCLA. And then I got pregnant in my 3rd year and I had my baby. I graduated in July, June, July, whenever you graduated. And then I had my first child in August. And so I called the fellowship program and I was like, oh, can I start 3 months later? And so they're like, yeah, start October. And then we started. So moving from Texas to LA, it's very different. It's much more expensive. My husband's is not a physician. He's an attorney. So he took the freaking bar and he passed it, poor thing. And then I panicked. By the time we were supposed to start, I was like, wait a minute, I have this 3-month-old. I have 0 family in LA. What are we doing? It's so expensive. Your job isn't as great as the job that you got here. So I backed out. And I got a call from Dr. Fiden on my personal cell phone asking me why. It was really nice. He just because they had called him, right? Because it doesn't look good when your residents back out at a fellowship, especially for Texas Children's. It was like, oh, can you tell me why? And I just kind of told him the truth. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah, I totally understand. It's family and, circumstances. And that was it. But it just kind of shows you for, the residents or the med students that are listening to this, or even the fellows that are listening to this, you have a certain path in life, like a plan, right, in life. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't sometimes go the way that you have planned. And it is completely okay. It's totally okay. You don't have to, I had a lot of guilt around that. Like I had a lot of shame around it. I gave up this position. Somebody else could have had it, and I kind of spiraled in those thoughts for a while. But I want to tell everyone that whatever happens is meant to happen. And whenever you have that calling within you that says do a certain thing or not do a certain thing, like go for it, believe it, right? Don't sit there and ask a zillion different people what you should do. Like the answers are all within you. And so just believe in yourself and trust yourself. And that's the biggest thing I've learned in life so far. So then I was here with a newborn and I took some time off, and after the baby was 4 months, I was like, okay, I need to I should probably work, right? I should go be a doctor.
Go use my degree.
Use my degree. And my sister and I were in the same residency program. We're a year apart, but we matched together at Baylor, at Texas Children's. So she and we approached a private practice that I had actually rotated through as a med student. You could do internships during the summer. And I got to know her, and she was really close to our house. And we were like, hey, can we job share? Do you have a position for us? And she hired us part-time. And she was private practice, solo. She ran a great practice. It was a good mix of, private pay, self-pay, Medicaid patients. And we would have stayed on with her, except that we had some differences in the way that we wanted to manage. And so my dad was actually, everybody in our family it's like the American dream. It's like the immigrants, you come here and you have to own everything and do everything by yourself, right? You want to be ownership of so everybody is self-employed, right? We have dentists that are anybody that does whatever job they're doing, they're self-employed. So my dad's like, oh, so when are you going to open up your office? And I was like, I'm not. He's like, yeah, you should. And so anyways, so we had a conversation. We talked to, my cousins have their own offices, and my cousin leased me the space that he has. And he's like, hey, come in this area. I see a lot of kids. I'm going to refer to you, open up your clinic. And my sister was like, okay, well, there's two of us. It's better than one of us. So we opened up our clinic in a predominantly Hispanic area, underserved, out in the outskirts of Houston. And it has been the most rewarding thing. We have grown the practice to about 8 providers, over 12,000 patients. And so it's, the area needed it. There was a need for really solid pediatricians that are, really care about that community. And being an immigrant myself, I think that ties very well into the kids that I am serving, because a lot of them are first generation or second generation immigrants, and they're minorities, and I am a minority. So I did that. I'm still doing that. And about when I was probably 40 years old, I kind of hit this wall, and I didn't recognize it as burnout. And I don't know if I still do, or I would label it as burnout. I was just tired, like post-call fatigue, right? And everything that I didn't make a difference. I cut back hours. I went part-time. I slept more, I ate better, I exercised, I took vitamins, I saw a zillion different doctors. And it was like, okay, I just, I literally diagnosed myself. I was like, okay, well, first of all, I thought it was cancer, right? That's the first thing. Oh my God, I have leukemia. That's why I'm tired all the time. But then I was like, okay, so maybe this is just like chronic fatigue, NOS, right? Like we don't know what the heck you have. You just have chronic fatigue. Or maybe it's like midlife. This is how you're supposed to feel when you're 40. And I had 3 kids under the age of 3 kids under the age of 5, and started my own private practice.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
yeah, but that's just how my personality is. I go at like 200 miles per hour, and my body literally said, no, I don't do this anymore. Here's what it says. And so I started, and there wasn't a lot of resources out there, right? 5 years ago compared to this day. So first, for a couple of years, I was like, okay, this is just how midlife is, being a mother, and my kids are like preteens, and that's really difficult. And private practice is becoming more difficult because you're fighting with the insurance companies and you're dealing with the patients and the staff and all that stuff. So, this is just the way life is, right? And then after 2 years, I was like, no, I'm not going to believe that. Like, there has to be more. Like, there's a zillion doctor physicians, living out there. I don't want to live like this, right? I don't want to live like this. I started looking for some answers, and I started reading books, and I got into a lot of like the self-developmental area of reading a lot of that literature. And through that, I became familiar, or I got introduced to some coaches, right? Some online forum with physician coaches. I knew about coaches, but I was like, very skeptical. And then when I saw that there's actually like physicians that are coaches, and I was like, okay, maybe I need, because I didn't have kids. I was like, maybe I need a therapist. But then I was like, I don't really have big traumas in my life. Like, I wasn't neglected, and I wasn't poor in a sense, and I wasn't abused. And like, so I was like, I don't think I need a therapist. So I got my own coach. And that was right when COVID hit. And I always say COVID saved my life. And because I made the decision to prioritize myself for the first time in my life at the age of 43.
So was that because of the coach? The coach told you to prioritize yourself, or what exactly?
No, I think it was, so no, because even you have to make the first step, the first decision to even hire a coach, or whatever the other big decisions is in your life, right? So that first step comes from something within you. And for me, I think it was just like, I'm so tired of living like this. Even though I have an amazing husband, my kids are healthy, they're normal kids, right? They've got their ups and downs, but they're normal kids. My practice is flourishing. Like, every checklist I had, everything that I had on my vision board, I want to get married, and I want to have a great husband, and I want to have awesome kids, and I want to live in this house, and I want to have this car, and I want to, serve the community. All of that I had attained at the age of 40, but I still felt horrible, and I couldn't figure out why I had felt horrible. That's what really pushed me. I really hit rock bottom, to the point that I was like, oh, like, what's the point? What's the point of living if I have all these amazing stuff that everybody conditions you and teaches you to live up to? Okay, I got there. I got to the top of the hill, the mountain, whatever you want to call it, and I feel like crap. And so I made the first decision to hire that coach. And then with the coaching, she led me through a lot of the struggles that I was having. And I found out that what I was missing from my life was literally me. Like, I was giving so much, as we do as physicians, and even during COVID, we're giving even so much more, right? I was so emotionally depleted. Like, I was avoiding and repressing and buffering my emotions for the past 40 years. Part of it is because that was a defense mechanism of my part, like immigrating here, being a minority, not having to take in all those insults, right? That microaggression that's towards you. And part of it was just being a physician. Like, I can't take on everybody's sadness, right? I can't take on everybody's grief. But in a sense, you do. It's just you don't learn to process it, and it piles up and up and up and up. And I think that's why there's so many physicians that are at a breaking point with COVID, because now that emotional load has accelerated a zillion times, right? And so even if we were bearing like 100 pounds on our shoulders and get up in the day and, you know, striving and going to work and try to make it, now that 100 pounds load feels like 1,000, and our bodies and our minds just can't tolerate it anymore. And we're just
because we've never released, right? We never had that opportunity to just release.
Yeah. So I learned to feel, because I literally had not felt for 42 years, even though I was a mother, I was a wife. It was like, I learned to actually feel it in my body. I learned what my emotions were. I learned to release those, to process those, to face those, to walk through them, instead of like, no, they're just going to be over here and I'm just going to keep going like a robot, right? Mm-hmm. And then I learned to take care of myself. Like for once, I learned to give to myself. And that is the biggest message that I want to give your audience out there. It's like, we have been conditioned that taking time for ourselves or resting, like God forbid you rested during residency, right? You were like the slacker, right? If you like didn't admit 20 patients and you left the other last 2 patients for the next shift to admit, right? Yeah. You were labeled. So resting and taking care of yourself was a stigma in residency. Like, you're selfish, you're lazy, you're self-absorbed, like you're a narcissist. It's like, really, you can go really drastic with it, right? And those are the messages that you've been internalizing, and that's been ingrained in your brain. So when you're in residency, or even when you're in your regular attending position or your job, and you're like, I really think I need a day off because of whatever reason, right? Like, I'm burned out, You don't even allow, like, your brain doesn't even allow yourself to acknowledge that you need that day off. If you allow yourself to acknowledge it, then you're going to get a lot of pushback from your brain saying, like, what are my colleagues going to think? What is my head of department going to think? What are my patients going to think? No, like, we need to change the narrative around self-care and just taking the time to rest. Right? Self-care is self-preservation. Okay. I didn't have self-care for 42 years, and I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up my practice. I wanted to, like, literally go hide in the woods, because I was like, please, everybody, just leave me alone. Can I just have some peace and quiet by myself? Right? Yeah. So I was running away from everything that I had worked so hard to build. Which is what I tell physicians. And so what happened is, I love coaching. I got coached. It completely changed my life. And then I loved it so much that I became a coach. So I'm now a physician mindfulness coach. And I use a lot of the mindfulness techniques with, simple things like being, meditation and breath work and just walking in nature, and just take journaling, a lot of different tools to be able to go back and connect with myself. And through those tools, I went from being anxious and like super anxious and overwhelmed and stressed. I would wake up in the morning and I would wake up with I lived with palpitations all the time. And it wasn't my heart, it wasn't my blood pressure, it was all that emotional neglect, that anxiety, that sadness, that grief, whatever I was carrying that needed to be released. But it was all bunched up in my heart. And that's
how you live with palpitations all the time. When did you start developing these palpitations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I will say, like, I do not, and this is one of the revelations I had. I was like, when I found out that all of this that I was having was anxiety, I was like, I never considered myself an anxious person, like, ever, right? Yeah. Ever. Like, I wasn't, like, I see teenagers now, right? And I know what anxiety looks like in your teenagers, or even in the little kids. Like, I didn't have chronic abdominal pain. I don't think or maybe I did. And I was so blocked off. I was so walled off, because I was like, I have a mission and I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to get there. It doesn't matter what's happening around me or what's inside of me. We just got to go right there. We'll finish that. Yeah. Right? So I would say if I went back to med school, I still wouldn't feel it. It was probably in the last 5 years, like around, and I really need to sit down. And if I traced it back, it would go back more, but for it to be obvious to me, it was the last 5 years. So I would say around like 38 years old. And then at 40 years old, one of my really good friends suddenly passed away of a pulmonary emboli. And she was having some chest pain today. And then that freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm having a PE. And that's why. So I started paying attention to it more when I saw what things that were happening to close loved ones. And I don't want people out there, humans out there, to get to that point. Like, why do we have to, face some sort of tragedy or suffering or pain to actually learn to pause for a second and be like, oh, wait, I'm human too, right? Like the advice that I give my patients, do I take that advice myself? Likely not, right? And then what the narrative that came out during COVID, like healthcare workers are superheroes, right? I just did a podcast on this and I was like, I want to retire my superhero cape. I'm not a superhero, actually. I'm like a human just like you are.
Just like
right?
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And those are the conversations that really need to change in medicine. It's like we might be perceived as being strong, and in our work, in that environment, sure, but there's limits around that as well, right? If you have no limits, I don't know if you've watched Encanto.
No.
That the Disney movie. Oh my God, you have to watch it. Okay, I'm into Disney. So there's a character in there called Louisa. So all the characters have a special gift, and Louisa's gift is to be strong, right? I mean, it's like it portrays physicians so well, and so she is always taking on everybody's problems. Like, I'm gonna fix that. Yeah, I'm gonna move that. I'm gonna do that, right? But under the surface, her worth is so dependent on the productivity, what she puts out, who she cares for, what she moves around, that she's so afraid that if you take her superpower strength away from her, under all that, she's a nobody. She doesn't know who she is. She's weak, right?
Man, you're speaking truth. That just makes me want to snap my fingers. No, it's so, man. Okay, go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. So that's what, if you haven't seen it, go back and see it because it's just amazing. I was like, who was like the therapist, coach, psychologist behind this? Because it is so on point, is that we are taking on so much of people and things, and you've got to learn how to say no to them and yes to yourself and be at peace with that.
Yeah. Because that's not what we're trained to do, right? We're trained to be selfless, right? We're trained to give. We're trained to always be available. We're trained to be team players, that's what we're trained to do. What we're talking about, that's not part of our training, and that's, before, right? For far too long, it was actually looked down upon. What? No. How dare you say no? Do you not want your career to prosper? Do you not want to climb the ladder? Do you not want to support your team? What do you need to take some time for yourself? What is that? Sleep
it's so funny. Yeah, it's so funny because when we started hiring physicians, right, we're hiring millennials now, right? Because I'm 45, millennials are in their 30s, whatever. And I will admit to this, I used to have, conversations with my sister all the time with these millennials trying to have a life-work balance. What is that all about?
Yeah, exactly.
They are so lazy and you don't go into medicine trying to have a work.
Yeah, what do you mean living?
Oh my God, they were so smart. That's what that should have been taught to us, right? Because you want to look at this as long term, right? You don't want to, run at 200 miles per hour and then like collapse like I did after 15 years or 18 years of practice. You want a steady pace, whatever that is. That pace is going to be different for everyone. And you want to be able to make the decision as like on good terms as to, okay, when do I want to retire? Instead of like, I just can't do this anymore. It's like to be forced into retirement, because we're all amazing. Like us physicians, we are so amazing and we are resilient, and that is fine to be resilient. But again, there are limits around that, right? Pace yourself, like advocate for yourself just as you would advocate for your patients.
Wait 1 second. Okay. I didn't want my camera to stop, but yes. So, question for you about what you said about we are all resilient. What do you mean by that?
So resilience for me comes from adversity, right? And so the way I explain it to my kids, because I'm a pediatrician, so I'm always explaining things on like a 3rd, 4th grade level. Yeah. I'm like, you got a C on that test? Amazing. You know what? Because now you know what failure feels like. And the people that face failure but get back up and they still move along are the ones that are going to go further in life, are the ones that are going to be resilient. The ones that face failure and they're like, oh yeah, no, I got to see, I'm horrible at science. I got to see. So that means I can't be a physicist. I can't be a scientist. I can't be a physician. And then they go and pick some other easier route, right? And so for us physicians, the way that we got to being, going through the MCAT and undergrad and residency and fellowship, and people that have moved on to other, and some people are trying to get MBAs and MPHs and administrative roles, is not because we had not had failures, right? It is because of our failures.
Interesting. So what you're saying is that the road to becoming a healthcare professional wasn't smooth sailing.
Oh yeah,
all downhill. No, you didn't just like, close your eyes, relax, and you made it. Like, is that what you're saying to me right now?
Right. And you don't want life to be like that. I literally had this conversation with my son because school comes very easy for him. And whenever he's faced with a little bit of like resistance, something happens and it's just like not as easy, he retreats back. And I'm like, no. That's when you lean into it, right? That's when you push forward. And those are the times, those particular instances in your life are the times that you are actually going to learn from. You're going to fail forward. We never, the word fail, F-A-I, is that F-A-I-L? It is a 4-letter word. Okay, F-A-I-L is literally like the other 4-letter word. That's a bad word to us physicians, right? And so that needs to change as well. And if you go back and you look at your road, whatever your road you took, not just like in school, just in life, right? Like if the adversities that you had in life, if that was like on a financial level, in a socioeconomical level, if on all these bigger scopes, your failures are who made you who you are now, right? A lot of people, a lot of clients that I've had have this, victim mentality of like, well, this happened to me when I was a kid, and this happened to me when I was a kid. And, yes, process through the trauma, work through the trauma, get a therapist, work through all that, but know that you are who you are because of that.
So they were your stepping stones. That's what you're saying.
You're what?
Stepping stones.
Yes, they're stepping stones. Exactly. Stepping stones, right? You don't get to, if you've heard of like people that are winning the lottery, right? People that win the lottery. Okay. And they get this all millions of dollars. Most people that win the lottery end up losing the money.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And why is that? It's because they don't have the tools to be able to handle the lots of good things come with winning the lottery, but there's a lot of other things you have to think about, like taxes and this and managing your money and finances, right? So your adversity that you've had are all those tools that you can add to your toolkit. That's how you can reframe it in your brain, right? If somebody told you no and you wanted a great promotion and they said no, that's not to say that you shouldn't go for the promotion again. That's to say, like, oh, I was told no, and that gave me another little tool that I can put in my toolkit. And then the next time someone tells me no, it's not going to sting as much.
So, along the lines of resiliency, do you feel like we need to become more resilient?
No, I think we need to have more balance in our life. Because being more resilient is exactly like wearing that superhero cape. Right? Just keep doing more, keep being more, keep giving more. No, we need to have more balance in our life. And maybe resiliency needs to balance with like boundaries and self-care, whatever that definition is, because I think it's different for everyone. Right. And the one of the big concepts that I really like to teach, and people can visualize it really well, is like, up to this point, we have been giving. And when you give, you literally take a piece of yourself and you're like, here you go. And then you're left with like crumbs. And you wonder why you feel horrible, right? So what can we do instead of giving? How can we share? Not give. Giving is taking a piece of yourself. You're actively doing something. It takes energy. You're taking your energy and giving it to someone else. Sharing is you are filling yourself up first. You're completely whole, grounded, settled, joy, whatever you want to name that, fulfilled. And then passively, that energy just overflows to what's outside of you. You're not grinding and pushing and giving, right? You're not getting pulled by the force. You're simply like literally standing there in the room, and people can just feed off of your energy because you're filled with so much joy and happiness and fulfillment and contentment yourself that now you're able to radiate it out to everyone else.
Again, I mean, you are speaking my language. I did a podcast on resiliency. It's called "Say No to Resiliency," because exactly what you said is 100% what I believe and agree with. That we are, as healthcare professionals, we are some of the most resilient people on this planet. And so it pains me when I hear, oh, I wasn't resilient enough after I worked X amount of years in healthcare and then, transitioned out. Like, it pains me, because that's not true.
Yeah. And that's the negative self-talk that we work on a lot during coaching. It's like, let's see what your brain is actually thinking. Let's look at those beliefs that have been ingrained in you by this particular, conditioning, whether that's from your parents or your mentors or, your teachers along the way. And let's challenge them, right? Like, do we really need to be that resilient? Are you really saying that you're not resilient?
Exactly.
Right? Like, really challenging those like automatic thoughts that everybody's just like, oh, they must be true. I've been telling myself like for 20 years. No, it's not true. Just because your brain tells you something does not mean there's truth. All the thoughts that come into your brain are opinions. They're not the truth. You get to choose which one you want to hang on to, and then you get to let go of the ones that you don't like.
Exactly. And having the opportunity in the space to really process that and to let go. It's extremely important.
Yes. And having someone that is completely non-judgmental, right? Because a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking to this stuff about their colleagues, right?
Okay.
Or even their friends or even their spouses, right?
Exactly.
And being super, that then it brings up the whole vulnerability, which is like a 3-hour talk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No. So that's why Hope for Med was created.
Yeah.
In the first place, on this topic was to be able to be that place, right? Because there is this instant connection that you are able to make with your colleagues, right? So if you talk to me about getting into medical school, going through residency, and all of that, and in the day to day of being a physician, you don't have to really explain yourself too much.
Yeah.
I have a very good understanding because I too, have gone down that same pathway as you have. And sometimes if you're talking with somebody who is not in healthcare and they look at you and they say, you're a doctor. What do you have to complain about? You make XYZ money, you live in this house, you drive this car. And then it makes you feel like, wait, my feelings, like I shouldn't be feeling this way. Why am I feeling this way? I have XYZ, and, the truth of the matter is that there is a mental health crisis in healthcare amongst healthcare professionals, right? And we know about that because we hear about it, we see it, we experience it, we live it, and we think about things like suicide, right?
Yep.
Amongst healthcare professionals, when we look at our colleague, I think you'd be hard pressed to talk with a healthcare professional who does not know of another one, personally, or at least second degree of separation, died by suicide, right? And then you look at that person, and the last time you saw them, they looked great, right? They looked like they were fine. Like I had no idea. And then you get this email. And so, we need that place where we can really let go, relax, share, be vulnerable.
Yeah.
We are human beings, right? With human emotions. I agree with you. We're no heroes, right? I'm an emergency medicine physician. I'll do my best to save your life, but I am not a hero, right?
Yeah.
And to have that location, that's what Hope for Med is. This third entity that's not a part of your place of employment, but it's this place where we can gather, as a community, shared experiences.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. So you said you're not a hero. I would say to that, even if your brain doesn't process that and it's like, no, we are a hero. Remember all the things that they told us we are a hero? Okay, then how can you be a hero for yourself? Right? Like ask your brain that. How can I be a hero for myself? What would being a hero? I know what it looks like being a hero for patients and administration and, parents and kids and spouses, whatever. But how is being a hero? How am I being a hero towards myself?
Yeah. What would it look like if I was a hero for myself?
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good journaling prompt to do tonight, guys. Very much into journaling. But there has been, and that's how, so there are now, I believe, 200 physician coaches that I know of. So there might be more, but 3 years ago when, coaching kind of came into the mainstream, they were like, I don't know, like 20. And now it's gone up like, what is that, 10 times? 20 times 10 is 200, right? 10 times.
Yeah.
This is why I'm not an engineer.
Exponentially.
Thank you. Right?
Calculator. Yeah.
I was like 20, 10 carryover. And because there's a huge demand for this, right? And the number of podcasts and other platforms that have come out to support these same endeavors of like the whole wellness or self-care, however you want to label it. It's not because we're like being flaky and we don't want to be doctors and it's too hard or whatever other people are thinking when they're skeptical about this. It's because we want to save lives. It's a different way of saving a life. right?
Yep. Yep.
And so that's why I get so excited about like every podcast, every platform that comes out, every physician from every part of the country that recognizes the need for this. There's never going to be enough of us in this area. Exactly. Right. So I applaud you. It is amazing what you are doing. It is amazing that you're even going outside the scope of physicians and, including our colleagues that we work so closely with. And you are definitely saving lives. So keep it going. You're doing amazing work.
Oh, thank you. I figured, when I was thinking about Hope for Med was, if I save the life of even one person matters, right?
Totally.
Even one person, the ripple effects are infinite in that one person.
Totally. The ripple, even if I like you doing this, you are essentially saving yourself because you're hearing a lot of the stories, right? And through healing, through hearing and through storytelling, we actually heal.
Yes.
Right. So for you to just take the time and pause and take that time for yourself and hear someone's story and connect, like right now we're connecting with words, right? But we're connecting on a heart to heart level as well, right? You're hearing my words, that's penetrating through you and it's going like, I don't want to get too spiritual about it.
Yeah, but it is. It's reverberating inside of me and all my cells. Yes.
Exactly. And it's changing the chemistry. Like when you're hearing me talk and when I'm hearing you talk, I'm not in the sympathetic cortisol, like alert that you are working in the emergency room. I'm in the serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin, right? Those happy hormones, right? Which we know what happens when you secrete those hormones in your body as physicians, right? So yes, it's totally a healing process for all of us.
And having space to do that is so important, and because it takes a lot, especially when you've been going through so many years of not engaging in these practices, of not letting down your guards a little bit, right? Because part of the training, and that's why we have to like start early. We have to start in, pre-med and med school and, and all those things, because, we are taught to be
resilient.
Sorry, 1 second. I don't want this on my face. Okay, thank you. The little square. Anyways, no, but not only are we taught to be resilient, but like we are taught to be competitive, right? There's only so many slots available in this medical school or this residency program. And so we're always competing, right? And so it's hard to collaborate with somebody, to be vulnerable with somebody when you're actually competing with them to get their seat. And that process is, it's a limited resources. So, you understand that, but once you get there, then
put down your cards.
Exactly. Once you finish and you realize that this is a marathon, right? I went into medicine to practice till I retired at a ripe old age. And, once you, leave residency or even during residency, right? Like, or in fellowship or whatever, you have to have resources to allow you to, yes, lay down your guards, engage in self-care practices. Self-care practices need to start much earlier, to really combat burnout, right? I know that when you were describing your experiences and you're like, I don't know if I would label it burnout, I would say, I think you were describing just emotional exhaustion that no amount of sleep could, make you feel better. You were exhausted. And that is an element of burnout. And the desire to give it all up. Right? You had everything and you're like, I don't care. I just want to give it all up. that is what happens when you hit that wall in burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently, when you said, we need to start earlier, I recently did a talk for pre-med students. Mm-hmm. And they were like, we want you to talk to us about being a pediatrician. And I was like, I'm not talking to you about being a pediatrician. I'm not talking to you about like my day as being a pediatrician, because you know what that is like. Let me talk to you about how it is in my brain, right, as being a doctor. And exactly what I talked to them about. I talked to them about how to prevent burnout. I talked to them about stop comparing yourself, the comparisonitis, the judgmentitis, right? We talked about self-care. We talked about like, let's, collaborate and sharing, and the whole mindset of scarcity versus abundance. And afterwards, I think there was like 30 people on the call. And then I was talking and I was like, oh my God, these kids are totally bored. They don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm probably going to get horrible reviews as I'm talking to them. And I got like 3 or 4 people. These are pre-med students. Now, the significance of the competition that starts so early. Yeah. These are pre-med students that some of them emailed me and they're like, oh my God, thank you for like just talking about that, right? Like creating this space and giving me permission to be like, oh, I totally do that. And this is where it's coming from. And one of them actually said, I'm totally burnt out, and they're not even in med school yet, exactly. Right? These are like 3rd, 4th year. Mm-hmm. And when I have a teenager that's a junior and she doesn't even want to go into medicine, I don't think it's just medicine. I think it's the way that the educational system is set up. She is under so much stress, AP classes and SAT and the social stuff. Forget the social stuff. That's a mountain by itself. And then bring the competitive. And she's in a pretty competitive school. It's a public school, but like there were 25 valedictorians last year.
25. Whoa.
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is not healthy. This is why we have an exponential incline in teen suicide, in teen anxiety, and teen depression. Now I see it. Yeah. Like I was like, if I didn't have the tools to teach my child, if I wasn't a pediatrician and a coach, like literally it just takes beyond a pediatrician to teach my child and coach her through it, she'd probably be suicidal by senior year or a college dropout, because emotionally she would completely hit burnout by the time before she even enters college.
Yeah. So this is such an important topic, to address. And this is something I feel like you and I could talk about this for literally forever, like soul sisters, like you, I mean, man, you had me snapping my fingers. Because it's so true. God, it's so true. Everything you said, I agree with completely.
Well, thank you for having me and allowing me to kind of share my story. And I hope it resonated with at least one audience member out there. And really, please, guys, you've got to take care of yourself. I keep saying this like 10,000 times. You've got to take care of yourself. Yeah. It's not selfish to say no. It's not selfish to take a day off. It's not selfish. It's not even selfish to say no to your kids and your partner. It is totally okay to be like, nope, I am not coming to your basketball game because I do not enjoy it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to take care of yourself, because if you don't, the energy that you carry, that is what is getting emitted to everyone else. So if you are in this like exhaustion, anger, I used to yell all the time. So that's how my energy came out. And now I don't yell. And my kids are like so much more connected with me, because they're like, oh my God, Mom, why aren't you yelling?
Yeah.
So when you do the work on yourself, the ripple effect, it actually benefits everybody around you. Mm. So please take care of yourself.
So Dr. Sogol, if my audience member wanted to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, so I have, my website is Dr. Sogol. It's DrSogol.com. And you can, if you're interested in talking to me, if you've hit burnt out, if you're at a point in your life where you are just feel horrible and you don't know why, I can definitely help with that. I also have a podcast. It's Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol. So I am 9 months into the podcast, and it's got amazing stuff. Everything that I teach in my coaching with my clients, I share on my podcast. So go check out to see if you like that vibe. And I'm also on Instagram, Dr. Sogol _mindful living. I'm on Facebook, but I'm more on Instagram, and I post a lot and I share a lot. So I would be more than happy to have y'all come on board.
Amazing. So, you've given so much outstanding advice already. But as we close, here's another opportunity. Do you have any last minute words of advice for my audience?
Last minute words is I want you to ask yourself, am I happy? Whatever that means for you. Am I happy? Do I know what joy is at this point in my life? Do I love life? Because when I started on this process, I couldn't define what happy, joy, and love was. My body had, like, literally, I call it an anaphylactic reaction when I would hear the words happy, joy, and love. So write those words down, or say them out loud, or think them, write them, and say it out loud, and just see what your body feels when you ask those questions of yourself. And that is a very good gauge as to where you are and what you need to do. If you're like happy, love, you're like, yeah, I'm riding high, then amazing. But if you're like, or if you're like, what is that? Then that's the area that you need to start with. And that area is you.
This is hope for med, new day for med, for us, by us, and just for us. This is hope for med.